Her whisper trembled through the air, slicing the silence of the barn like a blade. Untie me, broken bar, I crave. The rancher froze mid-step, his breath caught somewhere between disbelief and fear. The words weren't loud, but they carried something that struck deep inside him, an urgency that didn't sound human. The lantern beside him flickered weakly, its light trembling across the dusty beams. He stared at her, hands bound behind her back with coarse rope, hair tangled, face streaked with tears and dirt. Yet beneath that fragile appearance, there was something magnetic in her eyes, something that pulled him closer even when every instinct screamed to turn and walk away. He'd found her not an hour ago, stumbling through the storm. The night had been cruel, rain lashing the plains, thunder cracking the heavens apart. He'd gone to the barn to secure the horses when he heard the banging on the door, faint but desperate. When he opened it, she collapsed into his arms, trembling from cold and exhaustion. She hadn't said a word, only looked at him with wide, haunted eyes. He didn't ask questions, so he just brought her inside, laid her on the hay, and gave her water. But when she saw the old rope hanging from a beam, her whole body tensed. Then, with a trembling voice, she asked him to tie here, please, she whispered, before it finds me. At first, he thought she was delirious, frightened out of her mind. But the way she said it, the way her hands reached for the rope, it wasn't madness, it was terror. He tied her hands gently, unsure if he was helping or making it worse. She didn't resist, in fact, she seemed relieved, as if the restraint offered some protection he couldn't understand. And now, minutes later, she was pleading again, this time for the opposite. Untie me, broken bar, I crave. The words dripped from her lips like something forbidden, trembling with need and dread all at once. The storm outside groaned against the barn walls, thunder rattling the wooden beams. He could hear the wind hiss through the cracks, a low, hollow sound that felt almost alive. He swallowed hard, his hand tightening around the knot at her wrist. You're sure? He asked, his voice low and uneasy. She nodded quickly, her breath coming fast, eyes darting toward the far corner of the barn. He followed her gaze, but saw only shadow and straw. It's gone, she whispered, but not for long. What's gone? He demanded. She didn't answer, just tugged at the rope, harder now, panic flashing across her face. Please, if you don't, it'll come back, a broken bar, and this time, it won't just take me. Her voice cracked, echoing through the rafters. He hesitated only a moment longer, his mind warring with itself. He didn't know who she was, what she'd done, or what she was running from. But something in her tone, something ancient and raw, made him believe her. With shaking hands, he pulled at the knot, loosening the coarse fibers. The rope fell slack. The moment it did, the air changed. The lantern flame rose high, then dimmed to a thin blue glow. The horses in their stalls began to whinny and stomp, nervous, their eyes rolling white in the dark. She exhaled, shuddering, her shoulders trembling as she brought her freed hands to her face. Thank you, she whispered. But then, slowly, she froze, her head turning slightly toward that same dark corner. Her expression shifted from relief to horror, her lips parting without sound. No, she mouthed, voice barely audible. You shouldn't have done that, a broken bar. The rancher turned, following her gaze. For a heartbeat, he saw nothing, only blackness thick as ink. Then the lantern flickered again, and in that brief, trembling light, he saw something move. A shadow taller than the man, thin and shifting, its edges bleeding into the air. The sound of the wind outside grew louder, rising to a shriek. But inside the barn there was silence, unnatural, heavy, pressing against his ears like a scream held too long. He stumbled back, his hand brushing the knife at his belt, eyes wide. Who's there? He demanded, but his voice came out cracked, weak. The woman didn't speak. She only looked at him, her eyes filled with tears and something worse, regret. Her wrists were free, but her soul looked bound. The storm thundered again, shaking the walls, and in that deafening roar he heard another whisper, not hers this time. It came from the dark corner, soft and rasping, almost tender. You freed her, it said. Now she's mine. The rancher froze, breathless. He turned to the woman, but she was already shaking violently, her hands gripping her chest as if fighting something unseen. He reached for her, but the moment his fingers touched her skin, The lantern went out completely, plunging them both into a darkness that felt alive, and somewhere within it, something began to move. The darkness wasn't just absentia, it was alive, heavy, breathing. The rancher couldn't see his own hands, only hear the ragged rhythm of her breath somewhere ahead of him. "Where are you?" he whispered, his voice trembling more than he wished. The silence that followed was worse than any sound. Then came the scrapie, the unmistakable drag of a chain across wood. Slow, deliberate. It circled them like a predator testing fear. His pulse hammered in his throat as he reached for the lantern, fumbling for flint, desperate for light. The moment the flame sparked, his heart nearly stopped. She was standing only a few feet away, but something was wrong. Her posture was rigid, had tilted too far to the side, eyes wide open and locked on the barn's corner. The ropes he had untied were lying at her feet, coiled like sleeping snakes. "What do you see?" he asked softly, but she didn't move, he didn't even blink. The flame flickered in her pupils like two tiny fires. Then, slowly, she raised her hand and pointed toward the shadows behind him. "It's here." He turned instantly, knife drawn, breath fogging in the cold air. The beam of light from the lantern trembled across the wooden walls, revealing nothing but hay and dust until it passed over the farthest stall. The horses there were pressed back against the walls, eyes rolling, nostrils flaring. One let out a cry so human in terror it made his skin crawl. And then, just for an instant, he saw eye to something tall and narrow, its limbs bending the wrong way, its face stretched into a silent scream. Before he could even blink, it was gone. The woman gasped, staggering backward. "You shouldn't have freed me," she said again, her voice cracking, trembling on the edge of a sob. "It's not me you needed to Tia, it's what was inside." Her words hit him like a punch. "Inside you?" he demanded, stepping closer. "What are you talking about?" But before she could answer, the lantern dimmed again, the flame shrinking as though the air itself had been swallowed. A cold wind swept through the barn, snuffing it out entirely. The horses went wild. Hooves pounded against the stalls, wood splintering, panic cries filling the dark. He grabbed her wrist, shouting over the chaos. "We have to get out." But she didn't move. Her skin was freezing to the touch, her pulse fluttering faintly beneath his fingers. "It's too late," she murmured, voice hollow. "It always takes the one who unties." Her eyes met his then, and he saw eye to something moving behind them, like a shadow trapped in glass, twisting, writhing, growing darker. He stumbled back, shaking his head. "You're sick. You just need help." Her scream cut him off, a high, piercing, splitting the air as her body arched unnaturally. The ropes on the floor lifted, as if pulled by invisible hands, coiling around her ankles, wrists, waist. The barn shuddered. Dust rained from the rafters. He tried to run to her, but the air grew thick, each step heavier than the last. Then came a sound like whispering, of thousands of voices layered over one another, whispering his name. He covered his ears, shouting, but it didn't stop. Through the chaos, he saw her eyes rolled back, mouth open in a silent cry. The ropes burned against her skin, glowing faintly red, smoke rising from the fibers. "Stop!" he shouted, slashing at the air with his knife. But when the blade met the rope, it passed through nothing. The ropes tightened once more, and then, suddenly, released her. She dropped to her knees, gasping, trembling, her hair clinging to her face. For a moment, the whispers stopped. The only sound was the rain outside, softer now, almost peaceful. He knelt beside her, his voice barely a whisper. "What was that?" She looked up slowly, her eyes empty yet shimmering faintly in the faint blue glow that filled the barn. "It's hungry," she said. "It feeds on release. Every knot opened, every promise broken, a broken bar it grows." Her hand reached toward his cheek, shaking. "You untied me," she breathed, tears spilling down. "Now it's yours." He froze, realization hitting him like lightning. the chill crawling up his arms, the faint pull in his chest as something was already inside him, settling like smoke beneath his skin. His throat went dry. Outside, thunder rolled again, but it sounded stronger, like laughter hidden beneath the storm. The woman's voice broke into a sob. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You did what it wanted all along." And as the wind roared through the cracks once more, the rancher felt something unseen wrap tightly around his heart, up and pull.